After I refused to fund my son's luxurious wedding, he cut me off. Days later, he invited me to a peace dinner. When I showed up, 3 lawyers were waiting with legal documents. He said, "Sign them or you'll never see your granddaughter again." I quietly reached into my purse, made a call and said, "I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our stories, please hit that subscribe button. Tell us in the comments what country you're watching from. We love hearing from you." Today's special shout-out goes to Ernestine Davis from Houston, Texas. Thank you for being part of our family. Now let me tell you everything. The blue cardigan felt heavier on my shoulders than usual. I'd knitted it myself 3 winters ago when David first started dating Sarah. Back then I thought she was sweet. Back then I thought my son still cared about more than money. Now, as I smoothed the soft wool over my 58-year-old frame, I wondered if this would be the last time I'd wear it to see my family. 2 months had passed since our terrible fight about the wedding costs. $48,000. That's what David and Sarah wanted me to pay for one day. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," David had shouted, his face red with anger. "You have Dad's pension money just sitting there. Don't you want me to be happy?" I tried to explain that happiness didn't need crystal chandeliers or imported flowers. I'd offered $8,000, enough for a beautiful ceremony at the local church. But David had looked at me like I'd slapped him, like I was the worst mother in the world. "Fine," he'd said, grabbing Sarah's hand. "If you won't help us, we don't need you." The silence that followed was the kind that breaks hearts. For 8 weeks, no phone calls. No visits. No pictures of little Emma, my 3-year-old granddaughter who used to run into my arms every Sunday. I'd drive past their house sometimes, hoping to catch a glimpse of her playing in the yard. The mailbox I'd painted with butterflies for Emma's 2nd birthday stood empty. The swing set I'd bought her last Christmas sat unused. My heart felt like it was breaking into a million pieces every single day. Then came Tuesday. I was watering my tomato plants when the phone rang. David's voice sounded different. Softer. Almost like the little boy who used to help me bake cookies. "Mom," he said quietly, "I've been thinking. Maybe we both said things we didn't mean. Sarah and I want to take you to dinner. Talk things through." My hands shook as I held the phone. Maybe the silence had taught him what really mattered. Maybe becoming a father had shown him that family was more important than fancy parties. "I'd love that," I whispered, already planning what I'd wear, what I'd say to fix our broken relationship. "How about that seafood place on Oak Street? Captain Billy's." Captain Billy's, where I'd taken David for his birthday every year until he turned 18. Where we'd shared fried shrimp and laughed at the silly decorations. Where he'd told me about his first job, his first apartment, his dreams for the future. "Perfect," I said, feeling hope bloom in my chest for the first time in weeks. The drive to Captain Billy's felt like traveling back in time. Past the elementary school where David had played soccer. Past the library where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings reading stories together. Past the ice cream shop where he'd gotten his first summer job. Each memory felt precious now. Like photographs I'd been afraid I'd lost forever. Maybe tonight we could make new memories. Maybe we could remember why we loved each other before money got in the way. Captain Billy's looked exactly the same. Wooden lobster traps hanging from the ceiling. Nets draped along the walls. The smell of butter and seafood welcoming me like an old friend. David was already there, sitting in our usual corner booth. But something felt wrong. He was wearing his expensive suit, the one he wore to important business meetings. Sarah sat beside him in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. And there were other people at the table. Strangers in dark clothing who looked very serious. "Mom," David stood up, but his smile looked forced. Like he was acting in a play he didn't want to be in. "Thanks for coming." I hugged him, but his body felt stiff, uncomfortable. "Who are your friends?" I asked, looking at the 3 men in expensive suits who were studying me like I was some kind of problem they needed to solve. "These are some business associates," Sarah said quickly. Her voice was too bright, too cheerful. They wanted to meet you. Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't a family dinner. This was something else entirely. Business associates. I repeated, sitting down slowly. The men were older, professional-looking. They had briefcases and serious expressions. One of them, with gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Robert Hayes. I'm an attorney. We've prepared some documents that we think will benefit everyone. My hands started to shake. Documents? At a family dinner? This felt like a trap. What kind of documents? I asked, though my heart was already racing. David couldn't meet my eyes. Sarah was fidgeting with her wedding ring. The attorney opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Simply put, Mrs. Thompson, we're recommending that you sign over power of attorney to David and Sarah. You're living alone now, and managing finances can be complicated for someone your age. My age. I was 58, not 98. I balanced my checkbook every month. Paid my bills on time. I wasn't confused or unable to think clearly. I don't understand, I said, looking at David. Why would I need someone else to manage my money? Another attorney, younger with nervous energy, spoke up. Well, Mrs. Thompson, you have been making some questionable decisions lately. Refusing to help with important family expenses. Living in that big house all by yourself. Perhaps it's time to let your family help you make better choices. Better choices. Like spending $48,000 on one party. Like throwing away my life savings on imported champagne and designer flowers. The third attorney, who hadn't spoken yet, slid papers across the table. If you could just sign here, Mrs. Thompson, we can get everything arranged tonight. Your son and daughter-in-law only want what's best for you. I stared at the papers, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Power of attorney, legal guardianship, financial management. Words that meant they wanted to take control of everything my husband and I had worked 35 years to build. And if I don't sign? I asked quietly. David finally looked at me, and I saw a stranger. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone cold and calculating. Mom, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. You need to think about Emma. She needs stability, security. If you're not willing to help your family, maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family. The words hit me like physical blows. Sarah nodded, her face showing no kindness. Emma needs grandparents who care about her future, she added. Who want to help her parents provide for her. Are you saying I can't see Emma anymore? I whispered, my heart breaking into even smaller pieces. David shrugged, like he was discussing the weather instead of destroying our relationship. That depends on you, Mom. Sign the papers, and we can all be a happy family again. Refuse, and well, we'll have to protect Emma from negative influences. Negative influences. That's what my son thought I was. A negative influence on the granddaughter I loved more than my own life. The restaurant felt like it was spinning around me. Other families were eating dinner, laughing, enjoying each other's company. Normal families who weren't blackmailing each other over legal documents. I looked at the papers again, seeing my entire future disappearing. My house, my savings account, my independence. Everything I'd need to take care of myself as I got older. All of it would belong to David and Sarah. All of it would disappear into their expensive lifestyle. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with my neighbor just last week. Mrs. Patterson had warned me about this exact situation. Her own daughter had tried the same thing, using the grandchildren as weapons to get access to money. Martha, she'd said, if your family ever tries to pressure you into signing papers, you call my lawyer immediately. Promise me. I'd thought she was being paranoid. I'd thought my David would never hurt me like that. But here I was, surrounded by attorneys, being threatened with losing Emma forever. Time to make that phone call. I reached into my purse, moving slowly and deliberately. David leaned forward, probably thinking I was reaching for a pen to sign his papers. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Mom, David said, his voice sharp with warning. What are you doing? Making a phone call, I said calmly, scrolling through my contacts. Hello, Jennifer. It's Martha Thompson, Mrs. Patterson's neighbor. Yes, I need you to come to Captain Billy's restaurant on Oak Street right now. Bring the documents we discussed. I ended the call and placed the phone on the table. The silence was deafening. Robert Hayes, the head attorney, cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Thompson, perhaps we should discuss this more privately. Family matters can be emotional. Can they? I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. How thoughtful of you to notice. David's face was turning red. Mom, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Just sign the papers and we can go home. Whose home? Yes. Mine, which you want to control. Or yours, which Emma isn't allowed to leave to visit me. Sarah spoke up, her voice getting higher and more frantic. This is ridiculous, David. We don't need to sit here and listen to this. She started to gather her purse, but David put his hand on her arm. No, he said firmly. We finish this tonight. He turned to me with eyes that looked nothing like the little boy I'd raised. Mom, you're being stubborn. We're trying to help you. Don't you want Emma to have nice things? Don't you want her to go to good schools? I want Emma to have grandparents who love her without conditions, I said. I want her to learn that family doesn't blackmail each other. I want her to understand that love isn't something you have to buy. The attorneys were whispering among themselves now, looking uncomfortable. This wasn't going according to their plan. They'd expected an elderly woman who would be easily intimidated. Instead, they were dealing with someone who'd spent 35 years standing up to bigger bullies than them. How much money do you have in your savings account, Mom? David asked suddenly. The question was so personal, so invasive, that I felt my face burn with embarrassment. That's none of your business, David. Actually, said the younger attorney, if you sign these documents, it becomes very much his business. Full financial transparency. Complete asset management. It's all in the paperwork. He smiled like he was doing me a favor instead of planning to steal everything I owned. And what about my house? Yes. The house where you grew up, David. The house where Emma loves to play in the garden. David shrugged again, that casual gesture that cut deeper than any knife. Houses are just investments, Mom. Sarah and I could sell it and invest the money more wisely. Maybe get you a nice apartment somewhere. Somewhere more suitable for someone your age. Somewhere they could control me. Somewhere they could keep me away from Emma whenever they wanted. Somewhere I'd have no independence, no freedom, no life. That's when I heard the restaurant door open behind me. High heels clicking on the wooden floor. A confident voice asking the hostess for directions to our table. Martha. Jennifer Walsh appeared beside our booth, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who'd dealt with family financial abuse many times before. At 62, she was small but fierce, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that immediately assessed the situation. I'm sorry I'm late, she said, not sounding sorry at all. Jennifer Walsh, she introduced herself to the table, Mrs. Thompson's attorney. The three men suddenly looked less confident, less in control. Jennifer pulled up a chair and opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Now then, she said cheerfully, I understand there are some documents you'd like Mrs. Thompson to sign. Before we proceed, I think you should see what she's already put in place. She spread papers across the table, official documents with legal seals and formal language that made David's face go pale. Revocable trust, Jennifer explained conversationally, as if she were discussing the weather. Established last week after Mrs. Patterson warned Martha that her family might try something like this. All of Martha's assets, her house, her savings, her investments, have been transferred to the Emma Thompson Educational Trust. David grabbed the papers, reading frantically. What does this mean? He demanded. Jennifer smiled sweetly. It means your daughter will be very well provided for. College tuition, medical expenses, educational opportunities. Everything a loving grandmother would want for her grandchild. But, Jennifer continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. Neither you nor Sarah will have access to those funds. The trust is managed by an independent financial institution, with myself as the legal overseer. Martha receives a comfortable monthly allowance for her living expenses, and everything else is protected for Emma's future. Sarah made a choking sound. You can't do this, she shrieked. We're her family. Yes, Jennifer agreed calmly. And family members who truly care about each other don't threaten to withhold grandchildren unless they get money. David was reading the trust documents, his hands shaking with anger. This is impossible. We had an agreement. What agreement? I asked quietly. The agreement where you'd blackmail me into signing over my life savings. Or the agreement where you'd keep my granddaughter away from me unless I paid for your expensive wedding. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He'd never expected me to fight back. He'd expected me to be weak, scared, desperate to see Emma. Robert Hayes cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Walsh, I think there may be some misunderstanding here. Our documents were prepared in good faith to help manage Mrs. Thompson's affairs. Jennifer laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of steel. Good faith. Is that what you call meeting at a restaurant under false pretenses to pressure an elderly woman into signing over her assets? She pulled out another folder. Because I have some documents here that might interest you. Photos, Jennifer said, spreading them across the table. David and Sarah meeting with you gentlemen at your office 2 weeks ago. David providing financial information about his mother without her knowledge or consent. Sarah researching the value of Martha's house and property. The pictures were clear, damning evidence of a conspiracy that had been planned long before tonight's dinner. How did you get these? David whispered, his face now completely white. Mrs. Patterson suspected something like this might happen, Jennifer explained. She hired a private investigator to keep an eye on Martha's family. Imagine our surprise when we discovered your little scheme. She turned to the 3 attorneys. Gentlemen, I hope you're prepared to explain to the State Bar Association why you participated in an attempt to defraud an elderly woman. Elder abuse is a serious crime in this state. The younger attorney was already gathering his papers, mumbling something about misunderstandings and miscommunications. This isn't over, David said, standing up so quickly his chair nearly fell over. You're my mother. That money should be mine. The words hung in the air like poison gas. 29 years of raising him, loving him, sacrificing for him, and this is what it had come to. Money. Everything else, our relationship, his daughter's need for a grandmother, the family we'd built together. None of it mattered compared to getting his hands on my savings account. You're right, I said quietly, standing up to face my son. I am your mother. I'm the woman who walked the floor with you when you had colic. I'm the woman who saved money for 2 years to buy you that bicycle you wanted for Christmas. I'm the woman who worked extra shifts to pay for your college education. And this is how you repay me. By trying to steal everything I have. My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking with every word. Sarah grabbed David's arm. Come on, she hissed. Let's go. We don't need this. But David stood there, staring at me with something that might have been regret. Or maybe just anger that his plan had failed. Emma needs things, Mom. Good schools. Nice clothes. We're trying to give her opportunities. Emma needs love, I said firmly. She needs family who care about her more than money. She needs to learn that relationships aren't about what you can get from people. If you walk out that door, I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word, if you continue to use Emma as a weapon against me, then you're showing her that love is conditional, that grandparents are only valuable if they can pay for things. Is that really the lesson you want to teach your daughter? For a moment, just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy I'd raised. The child who'd cried when he accidentally stepped on a butterfly. But then Sarah tugged his arm again, and the moment was gone. Fine, David said coldly. If this is how you want to play it, don't expect to see Emma anytime soon. He turned to walk away, then paused. And don't expect us at Christmas. The threat was meant to hurt me, to make me change my mind and give him what he wanted. Instead, it just made me sad. Sad that my son had become someone who would use a 3-year-old child as a bargaining chip. Sad that he valued money more than the mother who had loved him unconditionally for 29 years. After they left, Jennifer and I sat in the suddenly quiet restaurant. Other diners were looking at us curiously, probably wondering about the family drama that had just unfolded. "Are you okay?" Jennifer asked gently. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My son had just tried to steal my life savings. My granddaughter was being used as a weapon against me. My family was broken, maybe permanently. But I was still in control of my own life. I still had my house, my independence, my dignity. "I think I will be," I said finally. "It hurts. It hurts more than I ever imagined it could. But I'm not going to let them destroy me." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "Good. That's exactly the right attitude." She gathered her papers efficiently. "The trust is ironclad, Martha. Even if they try to contest it legally, which I doubt they will, Emma's future is secure. And you'll receive enough each month to live comfortably without worrying about money." Pause. "What will you do now?" I looked around the restaurant, at the decorations that had seemed cheerful when I arrived, and now felt like remnants of a different life. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I'm going to make myself a cup of tea. And I'm going to start figuring out how to build a life that doesn't revolve around people who see me as a bank account instead of a human being." It sounded lonely when I said it out loud. But it also sounded free. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no distractions, just me and the road and the weight of what had just happened. I passed David's house, where the lights were on in Emma's bedroom. Was she asking where Grandma was? Did she miss our Sunday afternoon tea parties? Or had they already started teaching her that grandparents were only useful when they provided expensive gifts? The thought made my chest ache, but I kept driving. My house felt different when I unlocked the front door. Emptier maybe, but also more peaceful. This was my space now. Not something that David and Sarah could take away from me. Not something I had to defend or justify. It was home. I made that cup of tea I'd promised myself, chamomile with honey, and sat in my favorite chair by the window. The chair where I'd nursed David as a baby. Where I'd read him bedtime stories. Where I'd worried about him during his teenage years. The phone rang around 9 o'clock. For a moment my heart jumped. Maybe David had come to his senses. Maybe he'd realized what he'd almost lost and wanted to apologize. But the caller ID showed Mrs. Patterson's number. "Martha. How did it go tonight?" Her voice was full of concern and barely contained curiosity. I told her everything. The lawyers, the documents, David's threats, Jennifer's dramatic rescue. She listened without interrupting, making small sounds of outrage at all the right moments. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry it came to this. But I'm proud of you for standing up to them. It takes courage to choose dignity over family pressure." Did it? It hadn't felt courageous. It had felt like survival. Like choosing between drowning slowly and swimming to shore, even if that shore looked lonely and unfamiliar. "What happens now?" "Yes. Now you discover who you are when you're not being manipulated," she said firmly. "And I think you might be surprised by what you find." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about Emma. My sweet granddaughter who loved butterflies and fairy tales and chocolate chip cookies warm from the oven. Would she understand someday why Grandma had to protect herself? Would she remember the woman who taught her to plant flowers in the garden? Or would she only know the stories her parents told her about the selfish grandmother who wouldn't help the family? The uncertainty was painful, but I couldn't let it change my decision. 3 weeks passed before I heard from David again. I'd started a routine: morning coffee on the porch, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, evening phone calls with Mrs. Patterson. I'd even started volunteering at the library, helping children with reading programs. It felt good to be useful, to be valued for something other than my bank account balance. That's where I was when David called, reading stories to a group of 5-year-olds who listened with wide-eyed wonder. "Mom." His voice sounded different, uncertain. maybe even ashamed. Can we talk? I excused myself from the children's area and stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. What do you want to talk about, David? I kept my voice neutral, careful not to show the hope that was blooming dangerously in my chest. Emma keeps asking about you, he said quietly. She wants to know when Grandma is coming to visit. She misses our Sunday tea parties. The words were like warm honey, sweet and healing. And what do you tell her? Yes. There was a long pause. I tell her that Grandma is busy, he admitted. But she's smart, Mom. She knows something's wrong. Yesterday she asked if you were sick. If that's why you don't come see her anymore. I closed my eyes, picturing Emma's confused little face. She was too young to understand adult problems, too innocent to realize that her father had tried to use her as a weapon against someone who loved her. I miss her too, I said honestly. I miss her more than you can imagine. Then come over, David said quickly. Come for dinner. Sarah's making pot roast. The invitation sounded casual, but I could hear the desperation underneath. They needed something from me. Maybe not money this time, but something. What about the lawyers? Yes. What about the power of attorney documents? Another pause. We decided not to pursue that route. Did you? I said dryly. Or did Jennifer Walsh explain that elder abuse is a felony? David's silence was answer enough. Mom, look, maybe we approached things the wrong way. But we're still family. Emma needs her grandmother. He was right about that. Emma did need her grandmother. But did her grandmother need to be manipulated and threatened to maintain that relationship? I'll think about it, I said. But David, if I come over, there will be conditions. Conditions? He sounded surprised. His mother had never made demands before. His mother had always been accommodating, flexible, eager to keep everyone happy. No discussion of money, I said firmly. No lawyers. No documents. No attempts to make me feel guilty about the wedding expenses. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be because you value me as a person, not as a source of funding. The silence stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Okay, he said finally. Okay, we can do that. Could they? Or would this just be another attempt to manipulate me, more subtle than the first but just as calculated? I'll come Sunday, I decided. For 2 hours. To see Emma. If there's any mention of money or lawyers or what I should do with my assets, I leave immediately and don't come back. Mom, you don't have to threaten us. I'm not threatening anyone, David. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my uncertain mood. I changed clothes 3 times, trying to find something that looked grandmotherly but not weak. Something that said, I love Emma, but also, I won't be pushed around. Finally, I settled on a simple blue dress and the pearl earrings my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. Armor disguised as accessories. The drive to David's house felt like traveling to a foreign country where I didn't know the language or customs. Emma was waiting by the window when I pulled into the driveway. Her face lit up like Christmas morning when she saw my car. Grandma! She squealed, running out the front door before David or Sarah could stop her. She launched herself into my arms with the fearless love that only small children possess. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the money, not the lawyers, not the bitter words that had been spoken. Just this perfect little person who loved me unconditionally. I missed you so much, Emma said, patting my cheeks with her small hands. Where were you? Daddy said you were busy, but I thought maybe you didn't love me anymore. The words were like arrows straight to my heart. This innocent child had been suffering because of her parents' greed and my need to protect myself. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered, holding her tight. I will always love you. Nothing in the whole world could change that. It was a promise I intended to keep, no matter what happened with David and Sarah. David appeared in the doorway, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. Sarah stood behind him, her face carefully neutral. Come in, Mom, David said. Dinner's almost ready. The house looked the same. Expensive furniture, perfect decorations, everything arranged to impress visitors. But it felt different now. Less welcoming. More like a stage set where everyone was playing roles instead of being themselves. Emma grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the living room. "Come see my new dollhouse." The dollhouse was elaborate, with tiny furniture and miniature people. Expensive like everything else in David and Sarah's world. "Daddy bought it for me," Emma said proudly. "But it's not as fun as the tea parties we used to have." She looked up at me with hopeful eyes. "Can we have a tea party after dinner?" Before I could answer, Sarah spoke up. "Emma, honey, Grandma can't stay long tonight. Maybe next time." The message was clear. This visit was temporary, conditional, subject to their approval. Dinner was awkward, conversation stilted and careful. David and Sarah asked polite questions about my volunteer work at the library, my garden, my health. Surface-level topics that avoided anything important or meaningful. Emma chattered about preschool and her friends, the only genuine voice at the table. I found myself studying David's face, looking for traces of the little boy who'd once helped me bake cookies and believed in magic. He was still there, buried under layers of adult disappointment and financial pressure. "Mom," David said as Sarah served dessert, "I want you to know that we're grateful for everything you've done for us over the years. The help with the down payment on this house, Emma's daycare expenses, all of it." Here it comes, I thought. The setup for another request. "We know you have your own future to think about," he continued carefully. "Your own needs and plans." Was this an apology? An acknowledgement that they'd been wrong? Or just another approach to the same goal? "I'm glad you understand that," I said quietly. Emma was building a tower with her dinner rolls, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around the table. "David, I need you to know something. Love you. I love Sarah. I love Emma more than my own life. But I won't be manipulated or threatened. I won't sign over control of my finances to anyone. If you can accept that, we can have a relationship. If you can't, then we have a problem." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. Strong. Definitive. Final. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Of course we can accept that," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We just want what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone," I repeated, "is honesty. No more scheming. No more lawyers. No more using Emma as a weapon. If you want my help with something, ask directly. If I say no, accept it gracefully. That's how healthy families work." David nodded slowly, like a student learning a difficult lesson. As I prepared to leave, Emma clung to my legs like a koala bear. "Don't go, Grandma. Stay for my tea party." It broke my heart to disappoint her, but I'd promised myself I would stick to my boundaries. "Next Sunday," I told her, kneeling down to her level. "If Mommy and Daddy say it's okay, we'll have the best tea party ever." I looked up at David and Sarah. "If it's okay," I repeated meaningfully. They nodded, probably relieved that I was leaving before any uncomfortable topics came up. The following weeks settled into a careful routine. Sunday visits with Emma, always brief, always supervised. David and Sarah were polite but distant, treating me like a slightly dangerous relative who needed to be managed carefully. We talked about weather, Emma's preschool activities, neutral topics that wouldn't lead to conflict. It wasn't the warm family relationship I'd once dreamed of, but it was better than the Cold War we'd been fighting. At least I could see Emma. At least she knew her grandmother loved her. But Emma was growing up fast, asking harder questions. "Grandma, why don't you live with us?" she asked one Sunday while we colored pictures at the kitchen table. "My friend Katie's grandma lives in their house." How could I explain to a 3-year-old that her parents had tried to steal my money? That family relationships were more complicated than she could understand. "Sometimes grandmas need their own houses," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean we love each other any less." She accepted this with the simple trust that children have, but I knew the questions would get harder as she got older. 3 months into our new routine, David called with news that changed everything. "Mom, Sarah's pregnant again." His voice carried a mixture of excitement and worry. We're due in the spring. Another grandchild. Another innocent person who would be caught in the middle of our family's problems. Congratulations, I said, meaning it despite everything. How is Sarah feeling? Tired. The pregnancy is high risk, and the doctor wants her to take it easy. There was a pause. Mom, we might need some help with Emma. And there it was. The reason for the call. They needed something from me again. Not money this time, but childcare. What kind of help? Asked carefully. Well, if Sarah has to go on bed rest, someone will need to watch Emma during the day. Daycare is expensive, and with the medical bills. He trailed off, letting me fill in the blanks. They needed free babysitting. They needed me to be useful again. I see, I said. And what makes you think I'd be willing to help after what happened? Because you're Emma's grandmother, David said quietly. Because despite everything that's happened between us, I know you love her. And she loves you. He was right, of course. I would do anything for Emma, even if it meant helping the parents who had tried to rob me. If I agree to this, I said slowly, there will be conditions. Clear boundaries about what I will and won't do. And absolutely no discussion of money or financial help. Of course, David said quickly. We just need someone Emma trusts to take care of her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Sarah's condition worsened, requiring complete bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Emma would need full-time care, which meant I would essentially be living at their house 5 days a week. It wasn't what I'd planned for my retirement, but the alternative was letting my granddaughter suffer because of her parents' mistakes. Are you sure about this? Mrs. Patterson asked when I told her about the arrangement. They're asking a lot after what they put you through. I'm not doing it for them, I explained. I'm doing it for Emma. She needs stability and love, and I'm probably the only person who can provide both right now. Mrs. Patterson nodded understandingly. Just promise me you won't let them take advantage of your good heart again. It was a promise I intended to keep. This time I was going into the situation with my eyes wide open. This time I had boundaries. This time I had legal protection thanks to Jennifer Walsh's ironclad trust. Caring for Emma full-time was both exhausting and wonderful. She was smart, funny, curious about everything. We spent mornings reading books and afternoons exploring the neighborhood. I taught her to identify different flowers in the garden and how to make simple meals. She helped me fold laundry and told me elaborate stories about her stuffed animals. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely needed and appreciated. Not for my money, but for my love and attention. For my ability to make her feel safe and happy. Sarah, confined to bed upstairs, was a different challenge. She was bored, uncomfortable, and worried about the baby. Sometimes she was grateful for my help. Other times she was critical and demanding, treating me more like hired help than family. Emma shouldn't be watching so much television, she would call down from her bedroom. Or, make sure you use the organic vegetables for her lunch. I bit my tongue and reminded myself that pregnant women under stress weren't always rational. David tried to be helpful when he came home from work, but he was clearly overwhelmed by the responsibility of supporting a family during a high-risk pregnancy. Medical bills were mounting. His job was stressful. The house felt tense with unspoken worries about money and the future. I found myself becoming the stabilizing force in Emma's life, the one constant adult who wasn't stressed or preoccupied with problems she couldn't understand. It was a role I'd never expected to play, but one that felt natural and important. One evening, while Emma played quietly with her dolls, David sat down at the kitchen table where I was preparing her dinner. "Mom, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "What we did at the restaurant with the lawyers, it was wrong. We were scared about money and the baby coming, and we made bad decisions." I looked at my son, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes for the first time in months. "Yes," I said simply. "It was wrong. It hurt me more than you can imagine." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, and I'm sorry. Watching you with Emma these past weeks, seeing how much you love her, how much she needs you, I realize what we almost threw away. He paused, struggling with words. I was so focused on giving Emma things, expensive things, that I forgot she needs people more than possessions. She needs her grandmother more than she needs a fancy wedding or imported marble. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. A recognition that family relationships couldn't be reduced to financial transactions. Sarah went into labor on a snowy Tuesday morning in March. David called from the hospital, his voice tight with worry. "The baby's coming early. Can you stay with Emma?" Course I could. Emma and I spent the day baking cookies and making get-well cards for her new sibling. She was excited about becoming a big sister, chattering non-stop about all the things she would teach the baby. "I'll show him how to color inside the lines," she said seriously. "And how to pet dogs without scaring them." James David Thompson was born at 3:47 p.m., weighing 5 pounds and 12 ounces. Small but healthy, with his father's dark hair and what the nurses claimed were his grandmother's eyes. When David called with the news, I cried with relief and joy. Despite everything that had happened between us, this was still my grandchild. Still a precious new life that I would love unconditionally. "Can we see him?" Emma asked, tugging on my sleeve. "Can we go meet my baby brother?" The hospital visit was emotional and complicated. Sarah looked exhausted but happy, holding tiny James like he was made of spun glass. Emma was fascinated by her brother, wanting to touch his tiny hands and count his miniature fingers. "He's so small," she whispered in awe. "Was I ever that little?" I assured her that she had been, that all babies start small and grow bigger with love and care. David watched us interact with his children, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Understanding, maybe. Or regret for what we'd all almost lost. "Mom," Sarah said quietly while David took Emma to see the nursery, "I want to thank you for everything you've done these past months. Taking care of Emma, helping with the house, being there when we needed you." She paused, looking down at baby James. "I know we haven't always been fair to you. The thing with the lawyers trying to pressure you about money, it wasn't right." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd received from Sarah, and I appreciated the effort even if it felt incomplete. "I did it for Emma," I said honestly. "And now I'll do it for James too. Because that's what grandmothers do. We love our grandchildren unconditionally, even when their parents make mistakes." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I was so worried about providing for them, about making sure they had everything they needed, that I forgot what they needed most was a stable, loving family. She looked up at me. "Will you help us figure out how to be that kind of family?" The months that followed weren't perfect, but they were better. Real conversations replaced polite small talk. David and Sarah started asking for my advice instead of demanding my money. When James had colic and wouldn't stop crying, they called me for help instead of hiring expensive consultants. When Emma started asking questions about why families sometimes fight, we worked together to give her age-appropriate answers that emphasized love and forgiveness. Felt like we were building something new, something healthier than what we'd had before. Emma's 4th birthday party was held in my backyard, under the apple tree where I'd pushed David on a swing 30 years earlier. Nothing fancy, just family and a few neighborhood children. Emma wore a simple dress I'd made for her, and her face glowed with happiness as she opened handmade gifts and played simple games. "This is the best party ever," she declared, chocolate cake smeared across her cheeks. David and Sarah exchanged glances over her head, finally understanding that the best things in life couldn't be bought. "You know," David said to me as we cleaned up paper plates and deflated balloons, "I used to think success meant having enough money to buy anything we wanted. But watching Emma today, seeing how happy she is with simple pleasures, I realize I had it backwards." He paused, folding chairs with the methodical movements of someone working through complicated thoughts. "Success is having people who love you for who you are, not what you can provide." It was a hard-won wisdom, learned through almost losing what mattered most. The trust fund Jennifer had established remained untouched, earning interest and growing steadily for Emma and James's future education. David and Sarah never mentioned it, never hinted that they'd like access to it. They seemed to understand finally that some things were more valuable than money. Love, trust, respect. The knowledge that family members would be there for each other without conditions or ulterior motives. These couldn't be bought or stolen or signed over in legal documents. They had to be earned and maintained through daily choices and actions. One Sunday afternoon, as I sat in my garden watching Emma chase butterflies while James napped in his stroller, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The pain of that terrible dinner at Captain Billy's. The fear and anger of being threatened and manipulated. The loneliness of choosing dignity over family pressure. All of it had led to this moment of peace and genuine connection. Not the superficial harmony we'd had before, built on my willingness to be taken advantage of, but something deeper and more honest. "Grandma," Emma called, running over with a dandelion clutched in her small fist. "Look what I found. A wish flower." She held it up for me to admire, her face serious with the importance of her discovery. "What are you going to wish for?" I asked, taking the dandelion and examining it with appropriate gravity. She considered this carefully, her 4-year-old mind weighing the possibilities. "I wish for our family to always be happy," she said finally. "And for baby James to learn to sleep through the night so Mommy stops being so tired." "Those are very good wishes," I told her, helping her blow the seeds into the afternoon breeze. As we watched them drift away on the wind, I made my own silent wish. Not for money or material things, but for the wisdom to continue building healthy relationships with my family. For the strength to maintain my boundaries while keeping my heart open to love. For many more afternoons like this one, where being together was enough. Where love wasn't measured in dollars but in moments of simple joy. David appeared from the house, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of a man who'd learned to appreciate what he had instead of worrying about what he lacked. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, settling into the lawn chair beside mine. "We're making wishes," Emma announced importantly, climbing onto my lap with the easy affection of a child who felt completely secure. "Daddy, do you want to make a wish too?" David smiled, looking around at his family gathered in the peaceful garden. "I think all my wishes already came true," he said quietly. That evening, after David's family had gone home and the garden was quiet except for the sound of crickets, I called Mrs. Patterson to share the day's events. "It sounds wonderful," she said warmly. "You should be proud of how you handled everything. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to their own children like that." "It wasn't courage," I corrected. "It was necessity. I had to choose between being respected and being used. Between teaching my grandchildren about healthy relationships and showing them that love could be bought. And look how it turned out," Mrs. Patterson pointed out. "You have your dignity, your independence, and your family. Not everyone who faces that kind of situation ends up with all 3. She was right. I'd been lucky, or maybe blessed, that David and Sarah had eventually seen the error of their ways. Not all families survive financial manipulation attempts. Not all children learn from their mistakes. I'd gained more than I'd lost by refusing to be a victim. I'd gained self-respect and genuine relationships built on mutual care rather than financial dependency. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Frightened, manipulated, willing to sacrifice my financial security to maintain family peace. She seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, more confident in her own worth. Someone who understood that love without respect wasn't really love at all. Someone who knew that the most important inheritance she could leave her grandchildren wasn't money, but the example of a woman who refused to be diminished by other people's greed. The blue cardigan still hung in my closet, but I'd added other clothes. Brighter colors, more confident styles. Clothes for a woman who was still writing her own story instead of just playing supporting roles in other people's dramas. I'd started taking art classes at the community center. I joined a book club. I'd even begun dating again. Having coffee with a widowed gentleman I'd met at the library. Life was full of possibilities that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother or potential victim. 6 months later, I stood in the same garden, but everything had changed. Emma was helping me plant tulip bulbs for next spring's blooms. James was taking his first wobbly steps across the grass, squealing with delight each time he managed 2 or 3 steps before sitting down hard. David and Sarah were planning a simple wedding anniversary celebration, focusing on the love that had brought them together rather than the material things that had nearly torn their family apart. We'd all learned valuable lessons about what really mattered. "Tell me the story again, Grandma," Emma said as we worked in the rich soil. The story about the brave lady who wouldn't let the mean people take her money. It had become one of her favorite bedtime stories, though I'd adapted it significantly for young ears. In Emma's version, the brave lady was a queen who protected her treasure from greedy dragons, eventually teaching them that sharing and kindness were more valuable than gold. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a queen who lived in a beautiful garden." As I told the familiar story, I realized that Emma was learning more than just entertainment. She was learning about boundaries, about self-respect, about the difference between people who loved you and people who wanted to use you. These were lessons that would serve her well as she grew up and encountered her own dragons, whether they were family members or strangers. The most precious gift I could give her wasn't money in a trust fund, but the knowledge that she was valuable for who she was, not what she could provide. David joined us in the garden, picking up James and spinning him around until the baby giggled with pure joy. "Mom," he said, settling cross-legged on the grass beside us, "I have something to tell you. Sarah and I have been talking, and we want you to know that we're grateful for everything you've taught us this past year. About family, about priorities, about what really matters." He paused, watching Emma dig small holes for the tulip bulbs with intense concentration. "We're better parents because of how you handled our mistakes." "You're better parents because you chose to learn from your mistakes," I corrected gently. "I just refused to enable them." It was an important distinction. I hadn't fixed their problems or changed their hearts through some magical grandmother wisdom. They'd done the hard work of examining their priorities and choosing different paths. They'd learned to value relationships over possessions, love over money, integrity over immediate gratification. These were lessons they'd had to learn for themselves, though I'd provided the circumstances that made learning necessary. As the sun began to set over our quiet garden, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Not the false peace of avoiding conflict, but the real satisfaction of standing up for what was right. My relationship with David and Sarah would never be the same as it had been before. It was better, built on honesty instead of manipulation, respect instead of entitlement, genuine love instead of financial dependency. We'd all paid a price for this growth, but it had been worth every difficult moment. "Grandma," Emma said, tugging on my sleeve, "when I grow up, I want to be brave like the queen in the story." "You already are brave, sweetheart," I told her, pulling her close for a hug that smelled like sunshine and dirt and infinite possibilities. "You're brave every time you try something new, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you love someone with your whole heart." She nodded solemnly, accepting this wisdom with the seriousness that children bring to important truths. That night, as I tucked Emma into her bed for her weekly sleepover at Grandma's house, she asked one final question. "Will you always protect us, Grandma? Even when we're grown up?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, thinking about all the ways that love could be expressed and protected. "I'll always love you," I promised. "And I'll always do what's best for you, even if it's not what you want at the time. That's what grandmothers do. We love you enough to be strong when we need to be." She smiled sleepily, secure in the knowledge that some things in life were absolutely dependable. Love, protection, the fierce loyalty of a grandmother who'd learned the difference between being used and being needed. As she drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together as a family that had been tested and emerged stronger. A family that understood the true value of unconditional love.